All right, so today we're going to dive into a token analysis, but we're also going to have a CEO interview of one of the projects that are out there, and you know it as HBAR. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back to TechPath. As you guys know, we do a lot of these tokenomic type approaches on looking at where projects are rolling. In this particular case, it's a little different in today's episode since we'll be bringing in the CEO of Hedera Hashgraph, Mance Harmon, in a moment, just to kind of go into the depth of what Hashgraph is and why it's so important to the ecosystem of blockchain. I want to jump to their website, Hedera Hashgraph. You guys are probably trading this, many of you, on known as HBAR. This is one of those infrastructures that is a bit different than traditional blockchain. Even though it is utilizing a decentralized process, it utilizes what they call a leaderless node. So it doesn't have one, it still works off consensus, but it doesn't have one individual node that kind of takes leadership within a decentralized transaction layer. So that's kind of the big difference. I want to get with Mance and have him explain a little bit deeper, but I want to jump to Trade the Chain and take a look here quickly on where the market is on HBAR, trading at about 20 cents here. And you can kind of see a little bit of price movement here over the past 7 days. Sentiment also holding in pretty nicely. Had a little bit of a lull right here and then a nice spike, even though sentiment was down under 50. And then here we are currently at a 62.48 sentiment and a price at right at 20 cents there. So nice movement. I think this is going to be one of those to kind of pay close attention to. Additionally, I want to look over here quickly at TradingView and our analysis here, because this has both the sentiment breakdown as well as the amplification that we pull on these projects. And as you can kind of see right here and let me kind of go to my drawing tool. So this section right here was pulled between July 1st and right there on that lower bump that we pulled, that 24-hour cycle before it took that heavy drop on July 2nd. Went sideways. Sentiment was holding at about 59.61, mainly because of this movement that you see right here, moving up to that point. But 59.61 was the sentiment. Amplification was a little bit low, and hence you see this movement right here on our amplification layer as it's moving into this next little pop right there, and then we rescored the sentiment, and this occurred on July 16th. Sentiment came in at 58.34. Amplification, though, was higher than it was over here in this particular region where we scored sentiment. So this is a good sign when you see amplification and sentiment. Sentiment was holding, but amplification had risen almost 3.5 points here. And of course, it started to pay off right here as you see the movement and price action going up and trading in to a nice little climb. Of course, some of that is, and I think all altcoins have a certain relationship to how Bitcoin and Ethereum are doing in general. So some of that does go in that direction. However, there are projects that from time to time split off and have kind of their own life. And this is one of those that I think is that way. In fact, I think it's one of those projects that in even a bear market, this could be a token to keep an eye on because it does have a lot of unique attributes that really separate it from the typical DeFi crowd that you're looking at out there in the altcoin space. So we wanted to get the CEO on, so I want to bring him in now, and that's Mr. Mance Harmon, who's the CEO and co-founder of Hedera Hashgraph. Great to have you on the show, Mance.
Thanks, Paul. Glad to be here.
Excellent. All right, so Mance, let's get into, obviously we're going to jump into Hedera and Hashgraph and the whole idea of what you guys are doing in terms of a project basis. But I want to learn a little bit about you and your background. Tell me your background, kind of how you got into crypto. What was the process? I know you've been in a lot of different tech applications and companies. Kind of give me your bio there.
Yeah, well, I think it really starts in '93 with my co-founder, Dr. Lehman Baird, whom we'll mention, I'm sure. He and I have been working together since '93 for 25 years. And it was early on, very deep tech, machine learning for the senior executive in the Air Force doing research. We taught computer science at the Air Force Academy. I went on and managed a massive software program for the Missile Defense Agency. And we decided that we wanted to be entrepreneurs. And so we've done 2 prior startups in the space of identity and access management. And Lehman decided that he wanted to solve a really hard math problem beginning back in 2012. And that's what ultimately led to the invention of Hashgraph, which is the consensus algorithm that the company is built on today.
So, Dr. Baird, your co-founder, when you guys got together and you kind of said, hey, let's look at this wasn't really targeted at the blockchain community in the original concept, was it?
That's
or were
right.
you guys, okay, so
No.
how did the story go?
Yeah, so there was a general desire on Lehman's part to figure out a way to solve the same problem, but for different reasons. He wanted to enable people to sort of carve out a slice of cyberspace and then invite your friends and family and coworkers, whomever it is you choose, to come and participate with you in this shared world where you can play together, you can exchange goods and services together, you can work together, but without the need to have a trusted third party sort of govern the interactions among the participants within this shared world. So that fundamentally was the problem he was attempting to solve. It happened to be the case that Bitcoin was emerging and began to make the market for the type of technology that Lehman was working on. But that was the original origin. That's been the vision for what we want to achieve ultimately, and that's where it all started.
Yeah, seems like blockchain kind of fell into the perfect, technology development at the perfect time for what you guys were trying to achieve. So interesting. Explain to me how Hashgraph and blockchain differ, or do they? Kind of walk us through the technology structure.
Well, they do. They solve the same types of problems, but they do it in a very different way. Blockchain as a term represents both a data structure, it's a chain of blocks of transactions, as well as a way for the community to come to agreement on the order of those blocks or the order of the transactions. So both a data structure and a consensus algorithm. Hashgraph is very similar in that it represents a data structure. In this case, it's a DAG, a directed acyclic graph, a graph of transactions rather than a chain. And it also represents a way for the community of node operators to come to agreement on the order of the transactions within that graph. So there's some fantastic properties associated with Hashgraph that are different than blockchain, including both achieving the limit of what can be achieved theoretically in terms of security at the consensus algorithm level, as well as fantastic performance.
Yeah.
But those are the differences: security and performance versus first generation blockchain.
So you guys went in through the entire process of patenting Hashgraph. Explain. So the differentiation is real in the sense of a completely different process, I guess, in enabling what Hashgraph does. What are the key attributes of it that enable you guys to patent this? I'm kind of curious what kind of differentiates this from some of the other tech that's out there in the blockchain space.
Yeah, if you look at all of the other platforms out there that are sort of later generation platforms, not blockchains, but some other type of consensus algorithm that is used for coming to agreement on the order of transactions. Typically, they have a leader, meaning that let's say Alice wants to pay Bob a coin. That transaction gets sent to a leader node, and the leader ends up organizing or orchestrating all the other nodes in the network to come to an agreement on the order of transactions. Now, the leader might change. Who is responsible for organizing the work, so to speak, might change over time, but they almost always have a leader. If you have a leader, then that leader can be attacked. DDoS attacks, distributed denial of service attacks, can attack the leader, shut down the network. If the leader changes, they just change their target to the next leader in turn. and they can attack the network. What's different about Hashgraph is that there is no leader. There's no leader. All the nodes are identical in their function, and that property and the way in which we accomplish that feat of having a consensus algorithm that is truly leaderless and performant is the innovation that makes it possible to patent something like this.
You know, that I've talked to a lot of cybersecurity experts. You know, they still, many of the ones that I've talked with, they've looked at, you know, and when you look at the blockchain in general, for the most part, it would take some fairly powerful computing, in some cases even, you know, to the level of quantum computing, to be able to kind of break through a scenario like that, especially in a decentralized case. What you're talking about is even further into a secure ecosystem, in the sense that there's no leader to essentially attack, like you're talking about. So I could see how that is a very unique aspect. So security-wise, this could really start to elevate, especially as cryptocurrency and many of the blockchain projects out there that are rolling into the marketplace, eventually they're going to start looking at some potential breaches. We will see that, much like any kind of technology. I talk about this all the time, is that all tech is and can be breached at some point, depending on the computing power that you throw at it. So, but I like the fact that you guys have kind of pre-thought about that. Talk to me about the applications in where Hashgraph and Hedera can be utilized, you know, in real case scenarios.
Sure. So we're a general purpose platform, meaning that you can build just about any kind of distributed application that you might want to. Having said that, there have emerged some specific use case categories that the market is most interested in using us for. One is tokenization. So we make it possible for any token issuer to create a token on the platform and issue that token and manage that token in a distributed way. So NFTs, security tokens, you know, the whole gamut of token types can be created on top of the platform, and then the developers and the companies that care about such things can go and build their businesses. Another one is data integrity. So we make it possible for organizations that want to provide, maybe they're already trusted organizations in the sense that they have a business that's operational today, the market is using their services, they trust the organization, but they want to add an additional layer of transparency in their business process, and they can funnel those transactions, the transactions associated with their product or service, through our network, and add that additional layer of transparency to their customers, so that it's no longer required that you trust the single organization that's providing that product or service.
Yeah, I think that's the big key here with decentralized models that are being looked at, and in some cases scrutinized, in many cases around regulations and things of that nature. So it definitely kind of flows into that. When do transactions per second really apply to Hashgraph? Is that a key cornerstone of, you know, one of its benefits on the TPS? Because that's a big issue right now with a lot of DeFi projects.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we decided to create a public network, Hedera, on top of Hashgraph, there were 4 fundamental obstacles to mainstream adoption of public DLTs that we wanted to address. 2 of those were almost entirely technical. One is, as you mentioned just now, performance. You know, the first generation tech, Ethereum, Bitcoin is 15 transactions per second for Ethereum, and half that for Bitcoin globally. To scale any type of real application, you're going to absolutely need thousands of transactions per second, minimum. And so the Hashgraph algorithm checks that box, both in terms of performance and security. The other 2 obstacles that we identified were governance, and we've taken a very different approach to governance of this public network than the rest of the market has, generally speaking. And then stability, making sure that the network is never going to split or fork into 2 competing networks, which can cause chaos for anyone that has an application running on top of the network.
I like when I looked at Hedera, and I've been tracking this for quite some time. We do a lot of token analysis here as well, but I'm always interested in the underlying architecture of many of these projects. And with Hashgraph, the structure and its ability to kind of expand out beyond that is pretty interesting. Talk to me about write hash. I've seen, is it just them being able to develop on the Hashgraph ecosystem? Where is it that these kinds of developers can kind of plug into Hashgraph?
So anyone that wants to build additional utility on top of the platform absolutely is able to do so. We provide the core set of services that are sort of the primitives for building distributed applications. And the two that are most prominent are the Hedera Consensus service, which makes it possible for any developer to simply supply a package of information, a blob of information, if you will, and get a consensus timestamp on that, and then subsequently be able to prove that that information's not been altered or tampered with. That's the consensus service.
Yeah.
And then separate from that is the token service, which, as I mentioned earlier, it makes it possible for developers to create, issue, manage tokens of arbitrary types. And those two services together really open up an entire universe of use cases.
All right, so I see a lot of potential functionality there in enabling what you guys have built on the Hashgraph side. Let's get into what it means to be basically a green ledger. Explain a little bit about that. We've got a lot of ESG pressures coming in from all over the market. Everybody's, raining doom on the fact that that cryptocurrency is very bad for the environment, but we see so many cases that's not necessarily the situation. Explain the green ledger and kind of how you guys go about it.
Yeah, well, it goes back to the core algorithm. In blockchain, proof of work blockchain specifically, what that means is that the miners are all competing with each other to solve a hard cryptographic puzzle. And that's nothing but wasting CPU cycles, it's wasting energy, and it's part of the core algorithm. You have to waste a lot of energy in order to come to agreement on the order of transactions. Well, Hashgraph works very differently. There is no proof of work. There's no need to waste CPU cycles among the nodes competing with each other to solve this hard puzzle. And it's been created, the algorithm itself has been created to be as efficient as is possible with respect to putting transactions in order. All that translates into fantastic performance, fantastic security, with absolutely the minimum amount of electricity required to do so. So practically, it means that we use less electricity to, or I shouldn't say electricity, but carbon generally than Visa does to manage its transactions in the Visa network, let alone the first generation proof of work blockchains.
Mance, you've been around the tech industries for years now. You've seen a lot of things kind of come and go, and literally the creation of the internet, social media, the evolution of blockchain, and kind of where it's come from. When you look at kind of the future of not only blockchain, but in general technology and how it affects society, what are some of the things you guys are really putting on your bullseye to kind of watch for as you develop Hashgraph?
Well, ESG is one of those. I do think that it's one thing to have a green platform like ours is. It's something even more exciting to be able to enable the planet to go green from an ESG perspective by using that platform. And so I do expect that there will be emerging marketplaces for the trading of carbon credits, RECs and offsets. And we have an interest in that. Our council members who are governing the platform have an interest in that, and they bring entire ecosystems that have an interest in that. And so I do think that our platform in particular, but the industry in general, is going to enable distributed, decentralized marketplaces that are, make it possible to realize the goals of the ESG ecosystem. That's a big one.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you there. We had Algorand and Climate Trade on that were essentially kind of talking that speak right there is the climate trade mainly being a European country where there's a lot of carbon credits that are taking place. I see that coming down the pipe here, especially in North America, Canada, the US, where we'll see more carbon credit opportunities that could become open market, especially as Biden's infrastructure plan starts to really play into this, and moving into kind of the technologies, which I think a lot of people do not necessarily understand the impact, especially around environmental sustainable governance, which is the kind of the component here, but really your carbon footprint in a lot of businesses that are just pure data, moving data transactions. A lot of people don't understand the banking industry and how much impact that has. As you mentioned, Visa, just general commerce, even if you're just going out and placing an order on Amazon, the real impact of these companies and where that's going. So I think the blockchain component for this is definitely moving down that as a potential opportunity here for both society and also for a lot of business opportunities to kind of grow in this direction. I want to talk about when you look at distributed networks and part of this leaderless node approach that you guys have created, if you look at doing this on, say that someone, I'm wondering to what level or scope could your achievements be utilized? Could it be utilized in the DeFi space on a heavy level if somebody wanted to use it as a full payment transaction, or could it be used in energy or medical? What are some of the application use cases you see?
Yeah, the answer is yes to all. One of the biggest problems in the space of DeFi today is just throughput. It's just the ability to process transactions
right
at a low cost, but a known cost. As the value of Ether in most cases goes up and down, the cost per transaction fluctuates wildly. And in our case, we solved that problem by denominating the cost per transaction in dollars, USD, rather than HBAR, which is the token that's required to use the network. But the cost to make the API calls is denominated in USD, and we update the conversion rate on a regular basis to make sure that developers building their product know what their cost of goods is going to be as it relates to the product they're building on top of our platform. So we solve that problem directly. And because the problem, we don't have the bottlenecks in terms of performance that the first gen platforms do, the cost per transaction is tiny. It's a penny of a penny for a transaction, a consensus service transaction on the network, compared to tens of dollars or hundreds of dollars for a transaction on Ethereum in the context of DeFi. The DeFi use cases, of course, all can be run directly on our platform. We're at the very bottom of the tech stack, meaning that we're providing primitives at the consensus layer. We're not focused on applications. We're not building the value at the application layer, which is where all of the DeFi applications and distributed exchanges, et cetera, live. And all of those could live on top of Hedera as well.
Yeah, interesting. I like that approach because that's where I think a lot of innovation is really going to spawn from, is building on top of these platforms and very select, products and protocols that are out there that are really kind of exploding right now. Just the number of innovations that we see come across our desk, it boggles my mind. I mean, I've been in the tech industry 25 years. We've seen I thought we had seen everything until blockchain really kind of evolved, and now we've just seen a complete new evolution of where innovation is going. So great for tech, great for society, I think, and just mankind in general. All right, Mance, when you look at kind of the future of where all of this is going, and when I say all of this, meaning the future of blockchain, a lot of regulators out there that are trying to understand it. We just had the Senate hearing just yesterday that kind of really, I was a little bit surprised at how well they approached cryptocurrencies in general, much less the understanding of blockchain. I was pleasantly surprised that our lawmakers actually, they had been coached up really nicely, I think. But the point is where do you see the future of this going? Do you think there's no stopping for this in terms of opportunity? Or do you think this is going to kind of move into one sector? The reason I ask that question, I always talk about the internet, and people say, well, the internet is going to, completely become all these things, and really what it's become is a big e-commerce engine, more so than anything. It hasn't really solved most of life's problems today, if you look at medical and, real societal change. How do you see blockchain differing from that, kind of that Web 3.0 phase we're in right now?
Yeah, well, so the community, by and large, has been focused on DeFi for the last couple of years, all right? And I think that is healthy to some degree, but there's an awful lot else that's been going on behind the scenes in terms of enterprises developing enterprise applications and preparing to go to market with those applications. What's going to really surprise the industry is when we go from having dozens or 100 transactions per second on a given platform to hundreds and thousands of transactions per second resulting from a single enterprise use case. Right. That there will be a step. It's a step function. It's not going to be a slow growth of a few TPS on an ongoing basis. There will be a step function where enterprises go to market, they demonstrate the value of public DLT for their business purposes and their use cases, and it's going to shock the market. Now, the market's been hoping and anticipating that these exist, but very few people have been focused on doing the hard work over a long period of time in the enterprise space to realize that. They've been focused on what's the sugar high of the next month or the next week. And I do think that's coming, and it will cause a shift in perception of what the value is of DLT for the industry at large. DeFi's here to stay for good, but it will broaden the scope of people's understanding of the value of DLT, and it's just around the corner.
Yeah. Mance, if you look into the future and you think of any of the challenges that we are facing potentially in this, whether it's regulatory, consumer, and enterprise adoption, where do you look for, when you look into the future, where do you see the most or the biggest challenges coming at this industry?
The biggest challenge is just lack of regulatory clarity, all right?
Yeah.
And that's not a surprise to anybody. Everyone sort of understands that is a big challenge today. I do think that clarity is coming in the U.S. especially. Once that happens, I think we're going to see an explosion of growth. There may be some pain for a lot of the platforms out there that no longer comply once the clarity is provided. But coming through that, the uncertainty goes away, and along with that clarity comes, additional investment, and risk factors are changed as a result of the clarity. And I just think there'll be an explosion in the growth of the space.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's the biggest.
Mance,
that's the biggest hindrance to maturing the ecosystem today.
Yeah, I think that it comes with almost any major breakout technology, whether you looked at social media or the internet, which have kind of been the big two over the last couple of decades. And regulation was always kind of, and still even today to a certain extent, social media is running through a whole barrage of regulatory issues, and it's been around since 2006, 2007. So it definitely, I think we are still at the very early stages of where all this is definitely heading. But we want to thank you so much for stopping in on the show today, and we'll catch you next time for sure.
All right, sounds great. Thank you, Paul.
Excellent. All right, you guys are listening in over on the podcast. Maybe you're tuned in there. Make sure and give us a rating on our podcast channels. We love to get your feedback there. Here on YouTube, just subscribe to the channel, and also make sure and comment below. We love to kind of get your feedback. Are you holding HBAR? Tell us what you think about the project. Tell us a little bit more about some of the other projects you're looking at in the DeFi space. Love to get that. If you want to hit me up on Twitter, it's just @PaulBaron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.